later on with PDF form.
Sure. Okay, so it's lesson 12, and what we want to do, we're going to open up Lowballers, and we're going to integrate Web API into Lowballers, which is pretty easy with .NET. So what we're building and what we actually just built with Express is known as a come on, I can do it. There. We're building what's called a RESTful API, or RESTful web service. Anybody heard this term before? Okay. We did briefly. So what is a RESTful API? If we had a quiz next week, this would be on it. It actually, that's a good guess, but it is actually an acronym. Anybody find out quickly? Use your Google Foo and find out what it stands for. So it's representational state transfer. Can somebody explain that in English, please? Okay, you can't give me a definition that includes the term we're defining. So this would be, so it uses HTTP methods. So we used 4 of them. Up until today, we've only ever used 2, right? We've used get and post since like way back in your PHP class. So today we introduced put and delete. So REST uses HTTP, and the methods are known as verbs because the method names describe or sort of describe. I wouldn't say put describes very well, but at least method names like delete, they describe the action that's happening. So REST has been around. It's now the standard. It replaced another protocol. There used to be a different protocol for web services that was older. And REST services usually transfer the data in what format? Right. That's right. So before we had REST and before we had JSON, we had a different kind of protocol for web services, and the standard data format between applications wasn't actually JSON. Any idea what we used before JSON? No, the original data format for web services, in fact, there are some APIs out there that still give you the choice. Do you want REST with JSON, or do you want the older protocol with the older data format? In fact, we can probably find it here. It's similar to a language, but it's just structure for data. Like there's no logic. Right? Like there's no logic in JSON. Nope. Let's go and look at, so for example, Canada Post's API, if you want to get shipping rates from Canada Post, you can use their REST API where you make calls in JSON. So, you know, we're going to send you an address and a weight and a delivery date, and you send us back shipping options with prices. So they've got APIs. So here you go. You can use REST and JSON, or you can use SOAP, and the old format is XML. SOAP is Simple Object Access Protocol. Yes, you can. But so originally when web services were first created, kind of around 15 years ago, the main protocol was SOAP, and data was exchanged in XML format. And REST has overtaken SOAP, partly because REST uses JSON, and JSON is lighter. Like to write the same file, like to write an order object in XML, it's more character than writing it in JSON, because XML nodes have both an opening and a closing tag for everything. You have an opening first name and an opening closing first name. So in a big payload, that exponentially becomes a lot more text in an XML file. So it's more bandwidth and it's slower to transfer. So with Canada Post, you can still use their old version. You can still use SOAP. And I have created old web services that used SOAP and XML. And some of those are actually still in use in some legacy apps today. So REST is designed to be lighter, it's faster, and it's baked right in. This was actually one of the main motivations with .NET came out, because .NET was created in 2002. This was in the early 2000s is when developers started to think about web services. Before, doing systems integration was a nightmare. If you wanted to move data between applications, typically we had to import and export CSVs. So if you wanted like order data from your custom app you built and it had to go into like the accounting software for invoicing, you would have to export a CSV with all the orders and then manually do an import into another software. So the idea of web services was, hey, we need to talk to each other, right? We're building a web application. We want to send payments to a payment service. We want to send shipping requests to a shipping service. So web services, originally with XML, was how this was done. Absolutely. And you probably still see it in a lot of software applications. So Microsoft built web service development into Visual Studio. In the original version, you could create a project that was a web service. So it was SOAP-based, XML-based. I probably still have some on this machine. Old services where there's no front end. It's just a back-end logic, send and receive XML, and interact with the database. Actually, I'll give you one example of one I did. A client I had years ago, a lot of their orders, they sold their products on the shopping channel. And they sold like tens of thousands of products, but the shopping channel had their own system. So this time of year, he might get 1,000 orders in a day. So he had his own .NET site where people could shop on his site, and we had a database and a shopping cart, but people could order on the shopping channel. So we set up a SOAP-based XML web service. So every time an order came into the shopping channel, they could electronically send us the order and we would save it to our SQL server. And then we also got his suppliers to create web services. So when an order came in, we could look up who makes this product. Noah's company makes the product. Great. We're going to send XML. Here's the order. You send it. And then when you ship it, you send us back a tracking number again through a web service. Simple Object Access Protocol. That was the original protocol for web services before REST, which we're using currently. So what we want to do with low ballers is we want to generate a web API. We can do this in about 10 seconds. So in our controllers, let's make a new subfolder called API. So we'll keep our API controllers separate from the web application controllers, because all the web application controllers are loading views. Just create a folder. Just right-click controllers, new folder, API. Yeah. And then I'm going to right-click my API folder. I'm going to add a controller. So which one of these do we want? Yeah, let's let Visual Studio build us an API controller. It will basically scaffold what we just did manually in Node, right? We created the task controller with get, post, put, and delete methods. Visual Studio will do the same. Okay, I will explain. Let's scaffold a product controller. So it'll use our product model, our lowballers context, and our controller name. Yes, because it can have the same name. It's okay that we have two files called products controller, one that's an MVC controller and one that's an API controller. So let's let this scaffold, Ken, it's a very good question. We'll come back to your question in a minute. So this will run at the root. So Noah, you asked, it's got the same name. It will run inside, so the URL, instead of /products, it'll be /API/products. Notice the root tag at the top. So it creates a controller, uses our context with dependency injection, and here are the methods. So get, it uses HTTP get, and going to return JSON. There's no return view statements. Get one will either return a 404 response or an object in JSON, and then we have put for updating, post, and delete. So we can try these. If I start my application, so I want to load API/products. So this will call the get that should query using our products model and go and fetch all of our products. I can also test my API. I highly recommend installing this tool. So here's my product. If I pass in an ID, like ID 1001 as a parameter, it should load just this product. So there's our get one. If I pass in an invalid ID, I get a 404 response. And I can also try my post and delete. So this is where a tool like Postman is helpful. This is actually how I'm going to evaluate your web API. So I'll go and take my So I'm going to create a new product using my API. So I'll make a post I'll set up my form data as JSON. I won't put in an ID because my database will assign the ID. I'll create a new product. New. Price can be $100. My photo is null. No, this is the one I would recommend. It's called Postman. It's free. So we can use this to test any REST API. So we put in the URL and the HTTP method we want to run. If we're doing post, I can set up the JSON body of my post. And then I can execute my request. Okay, that's fine, because then I can do an edit. So it gives me, here's my response back. I get a product ID of 1004. So actually what I'll do, I can do an update now. I can test it with put as well. So now if I add product ID of 1004 and append the ID on to my URL, I'll change my method from post to put and try to update this. Well, in this case, my API is public. So where did I? Oh, I missed a comment. So I get a bad request because my JSON format is broken. So I got 204, no content. That was what our node API returned, I think, for delete. But now if I run the GET request at this same URL, it should show me that the name has been updated. So all the CRUD is working. This is actually the tool I'm going to use to mark your assignment. You have to scaffold one controller, which just took us 10 seconds. I'm then going to run get, I'm going to post a new object, then I'll do a put to try and update it, then I'll do a delete to get rid of it. So if I run delete, it says 200, okay. And now if I run get, I should get not found. Right? So I created the object, I updated it, I deleted it, and now I've made sure it's gone. This is all you need to do for part 3. This is an easy 5%. No, you can just scaffold the controller. I'm going to test it but you do need to deploy it. Because when you deploy it, your API to Azure, because it's public, yes, there's no authentication on it right now. Oh yeah, don't worry about that. One commit is fine. Make one commit. Make one commit. So that's all I'm going to do to mark it. If I can get the data, get one, add, update it, delete it, make sure it's gone, there's 5% of your grade. Easy. Now, Ken, I'm going to come back to two issues you've raised. So yes, this is public. Typically, we create authentication using an object called JWT. It's a Java token. So we can require a JWT token along with the request, and we can validate for that token. Right. I'll come to your question in a sec because I want to get to your original question, which is why would we bother doing this? Right. So let's say we want to build a mobile app where we can manage the administrator says, I want to be able to manage my products on the dock at the cottage. We could build a mobile app with a front end and it just calls the API. Or maybe what we want to do is we would still require authentication, but maybe we want to say, make this an API available to our suppliers who are putting products in the store, right? Surge as a company, and we sell 100 of his products. So rather than Surge generating a CSV and emailing and saying, hey guys, here are my new products for Christmas, we're going to say, here's the API endpoint, lowballers.com/API/products. Surge, you can put in your own products. You can price them how you want, and they're automatically going to appear in our store. So if we want to give access to parts of our application to business partners, we can do it through the API. Right. So that's the other piece of this. If you're going to build an API, you have to document it, because the whole reason you're building an API presumably is because some other developer of another application needs to work with your API. So you need to tell them, you need to provide a document. These are the methods you have access to. This is what the authentication looks like. These are the types of responses you need to send us. And this is what our API methods are going to return to you. So I think I might have a couple of old examples here. Yeah, so here's a really old service. I actually have it. This was the service the shopping channel used to send orders. Darn, I'm not sure, do I have? It might be empty. Hang on, I probably have it on OneDrive. So I not only had to create the API, but I had to create the documentation. Let's see. Okay. I didn't do this one. Actually, here's another API that I integrated into a .NET site that I built. So the idea was users were in my site. We licensed this to a company, and that company took on another third-party service, and they wanted their users to have to access both services, but they didn't want them to have two separate logins. So they said, we want users to log in through your .NET site, but then once someone's there, they should be able to click a button and be authenticated through to this other site. So I work with the developer. He created an API because I had to make calls to his site. So he created a spec. So here's how you generate an authentication token, and you have to include this token with every request. So he set out, here are all the methods, all the endpoints, and here's what you have to send us, and here's what you get back for every method. So, fortunately, there is now a cool tool out there called Swagger that automatically generates API documentation. We used to have to do this manually. Swagger will now not only generate your documentation, but every time your API changes, it regenerates the documentation. So if you're trying to work with another developer, you no longer have to write the docs. We're going to use Swagger. This will take us 5 minutes. We've built an API. We're going to use Swagger to document it. There's NuGet packages to do this. Not as well as Swagger does. So I've put this link on D2L. I'll just log in. We'll follow it quickly. We have to install a couple packages, and we can lift a bit of the code out of the tutorial, and Swagger will document an API. Yeah, so go on to D2L, because you'll want the links, a couple links here. What did you have to do? Okay, good to know. Okay. So what we need, so there is a brief tutorial from the .NET site The tutorials for .NET Core 3, so there's one little tweak we have to make. One thing in there won't quite work. So the link for Postman is in here. It's in the week 12 folder. So there is a couple of tutorials on Web API. We just did the really quick and dirty version. So the last item in the week 12 is documenting Web API with Swagger. No, you guys are done. This is your last week. Those are makeups for any classes you would have missed. Yes. Yeah, you can do it right here. It just changes it. Yes. Okay, so we're going to use Swagger, and then there's two options for generating documentation. There's two other sub packages. One is called Swashbuckle, and one is called NSwag. We'll use Swashbuckle, I think. So this is what the docs will actually look like. If we use Swagger, it'll generate an API document that looks like this. It'll list the methods. And then if you click on any method, it shows you a JSON representation of this is what parameters the method needs for a request. And this is what it sends back as a response. And you can even try the API live in the browser. You don't actually need Postman if you use Swashbuckle. It acts instead of Postman. You can do it right through the browser, which is kind of neat. So I'll click this link here, getting started with Swashbuckle. So the first thing we're going to need, actually, there's one step they missed. So we need a couple of packages. So I'm going to right-click my project, manage NuGet packages. And in Browse, the first thing we need is called OpenAPI. Microsoft OpenAPI, so it models JSON for OpenAPI specification docs. So this one right here, I want to install this. No, we don't need it in the test project. We only need it in the lowballers project. So install Microsoft.OpenAPI. That's weird. Let me try that again. Why am I getting this? I'll try it here through the Manage for Solution. And then I should just be able to pick my lowballers project. Yeah, okay. So do it through right-click, Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. I only need it in lowballers. The test project shouldn't need it. Well, that's interesting. Okay, what if I put it in both? I don't need it in my test project, but it might insist. I'm trying to install OpenAPI. Let's see. What is going on? Huh. I should be able to install a package. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to try the package manager console. Well, I tried the latest. It wouldn't install. I get the same error. Details could not be loaded. Oh, it says it's, hang on, there's something. That's very odd. Well, if I do it, I can right click the project I want and say manage. So then it knows I'm in this project. I'm not sure why I'm having this issue. Well, it depends which file you have open. Okay. I think about what's going on here. My NuGet dependencies are. Let me rebuild my solution. Because it's having an issue finding my dependencies for my test project. So I think there's just something wrong with my project. Hang on, we're gonna do one thing at a time. So low ballers, test, depends on low ballers, projects are built. Okay. I don't know what's wrong with my dependencies. I'm gonna try to install, let's see. I'll try the console. So I'm alone in having this issue, right? Okay. Let's try that. I've rebuilt the project. There's an issue with my dependencies. So the next thing to install is install SwashbuckleASPNetCore, as you can see on my screen. So you can use you don't have to use the command line. You can just use package manager, search for SwashbuckleASPNetCore. No, there's something wrong with the dependencies with NuGet in my low ballers in my test project. Same issue. I think what I may have to do, let's see. I'm going to stop my live unit testing. I don't know if that's a problem. Okay. My dependencies seem to be okay now. I will go back and try again. So I'll try OpenAPI again. Yes, that works. Thank you, Tolu. Masterstroke. So now I'm going to install SwashbuckleASPNetCore. So I'll install that. So now we can just follow along in the tutorial. So in our startup file, it wants us to make a reference to Microsoft.openapi.models. So we'll do that. So in startup, We'll add that reference. And then we need some code in configure services. Right here. It says add and configure Swagger. We'll add the reference to Microsoft.OpenAPI.models. We need to add the Swagger generator to configure services. So I'm just going to copy these lines. We're probably going to have to make one change here because this is referencing something in .NET Core 3.0, I think. So just copy this section that's highlighted in yellow. We already have the add DB context. We don't need that. So this is, and this goes in configure services. Yep, so in here, here's our, we've done lots of work in configure services, setting up our database and identity, adding Google and Facebook, adding session support for configurations. So paste it in here. It doesn't like this OpenAPI class. This is, will work in .NET Core 3. So I'm going to change this to just be new info. This is an older class that requires a reference to Swagger. So take out the word OpenAPI from that class. We're using an older class because OpenAPI is only going to work, that class only works in .NET Core 3.0. So change that word to info and then accept the reference to swashbuckle.ASPNetCore.swagger. So this creates a Swagger document. I'll call it Lowballers API. You can change the title. So this will be at the heading of our Swagger file. I will probably ask you to do this on the final exam to build a scaffold, a controller, and use Swagger. And then there's only one more step. In the configure method, we need these lines. We need to enable Swagger and Swagger UI, and we set up the endpoint. So this is the URL where we can access the Swagger file. So just copy that stuff. And again, I'll change this so it doesn't say my API, it'll say Lowballers API. You can even configure your Swagger doc to use, certain CSS, whatever. We'll just use it as it is. So I'll put this down at the bottom of the figure. And again, I'll change the name to Lowballers API. So it's going to generate a document called swagger.json. So you can change the versions, you can change the names, you can add CSS, you can customize the file. So after I build, I'll go back here, and if I just hit localhost/swagger, oops, I have to restart my server. So this is going to render an HTML page using the Swagger UI. So if we make multiple versions as well, it archives the versions here. So right now we only have version 1, but if we make changes, Swagger will regenerate the doc. We can go and see the previous versions. So here is our API. So if I want to run get, it says no request parameters. Here's the response. We get a 200 success with sample data. For post, to do get with an ID, we need to pass in, we need to pass in an integer, and it sends back a 200 response. It just describes the request parameter. I didn't do anything. I'm just showing what it offers. If you click this, click the second get, where it's API/product/ID. It says here, parameters are ID integer. And then it shows what model classes our API is working with. So we have to be careful who we give access to this to, but we also have the try it out button. So this works like Postman. So you can just say execute a GET request. It runs the request in the browser and will return all the response from the API method. So it gives us a curl if we want to run it from the command line. Here's the response body. This gives us all of the products. So what if we change the API? What if we make a new method? Let's make a new method quickly and then just get Swagger to update the document. So let's go back to our product controller in the API. We'll make one more method down at the bottom. So we'll define this as HTTP get. We'll just return a string. We'll call the method get some text. Takes no parameters, it just returns. So if I want to go and update the version in my startup, we can, as soon as we build, Swagger will generate a version 1.1. So I'm going to save this. I'll go back to startup. I'll maybe call this v1.1. I'll just update the versions. So now I'll build again. And Swagger should generate a new version of the API doc that will include our new method. So I'll just refresh the Swagger page. So Swagger is not actually a .NET tool. It's become an industry standard for documenting RESTful APIs. And Visual Studio now has the NuGet packages to integrate it. So we should now get version 1.1. Okay. What happened here? Oh, it may be the path. Hang on. I don't know. I think I have to leave my endpoint. Let's see. Maybe I'm not sure what's up with my versioning. Hang on, I'll leave this as version 1. One more try. If not, I'll have to leave it at version 1. I'll have to think about the versioning a little more. I'm hoping our new method gets included. Could be. Let's see. I'll just put my version back to 1. I just want to see whether the document gets updated. I tried changing that. It didn't like that very much. Yes, it was V1 to begin with. Yeah, because I updated that to 1.1. I'm going to send it all back to V1. So we'll see if it loads. Yeah, I know it doesn't, but it didn't before. Okay, so I managed to break it somehow. What did I do wrong? Let's see. Will it load this way? I know you guys have to get the class. Didn't quite work as I wanted it to. We'll see if I can load it at all. Okay, I will have to figure that out. Why? I'll post an update when I figure that out. You don't have to update it. So all you need to do for assignment 2, part 3 is scaffold one API controller. Make a folder in controllers, right click, add controller with entity framework, boom, deploy it. That's it. No, I don't believe you have to read the document, but let's see. No, Swagger's not required. I may ask you to do it on the exam though. Okay, so I will mark your unit tests as quickly as I can.